it's about that case of the SEC versus the Wahi brothers. And there's a quote out there where you talk about a striking example of regulation by enforcement is what SEC has basically done. But I just want to get clarity from you about that. What does that exactly mean? Striking example of regulation by enforcement. What's the point that you're trying to make? Are you cautioning against such action without regulation, or are you saying that regulators need to work together and agree on decisions before something like labeling 9 crypto tokens as securities comes about?
So there should be no tolerance for anybody who's breaking the law, and anybody who's operating in an unregistered manner needs to be making sure that they are following all laws and getting the appropriate registrations. But that being said, this is really a statement about what is the right way to regulate. And that's just going back to principles of good government and transparency and public engagement. That's what the United States of America is. We're a participatory democracy. And so this case could have broad implications. There are open questions around some of the tokens that are described in the complaint, and particularly utility tokens and those involving DAOs. And so I think where there is a lack of regulatory clarity, it's important that we have good process, which leads to good outcomes. And that means engaging with the public and following the Administrative Procedure Act.
If you have to infer from what you said, you're basically saying that the SEC has gone ahead with the case, and it's not done what is basically called as talking to the public before coming up with a regulation or implementing something like a framework which leads to somebody getting imprisoned or a case being filed against somebody. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, people need to know what the rules are so they can follow them. I don't believe in any kind of gotcha regulation where the rules are constantly changing on people and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. I believe that responsible actors do want to comply with the laws. That's how they can grow their business in a compliant way. But it's incumbent upon regulators to make sure that we're providing that regulatory clarity. And we have a lot of tools to do that don't involve bringing enforcement cases where, the broad implications of this could result in, first of all, looking at the securities laws and applying the Howey test to particular types of tokens. That's something. And then there's, of course, what others have commented on, which is a chilling effect that it's having on the industry because of the fact that it's disruptive to file a complaint like this, but not have a runway or a path to the regulation and compliance.
Focus on crypto, and given the recent collapse of an algorithmic stablecoin and the bankruptcy of several crypto lending platforms, this is a well-timed hearing. And of course, one would think that we'd hear from the SEC, the primary federal regulator of securities, especially considering that the chairman there considers nearly every cryptocurrency to be a security. That's the request Republicans made. Now, there must be some good reason why Chairman Gensler or one of his subordinates can't appear before the Senate Banking Committee to explain what the SEC was doing while several crypto lending platforms, including Celsius and Voyager, imploded, especially since the chairman himself would very likely claim that these companies fall entirely into his jurisdiction. Our Democratic colleague said he's not testifying today because it's possible that he may appear at the committee this fall. Well, that's little comfort to the thousands of Americans who lent their crypto to Celsius and Voyager, some of whom will be unsecured creditors now in those companies' bankruptcy proceedings. What was the SEC doing? While these companies and others were offering lending products that looked an awful lot like securities. And what's the SEC doing now to help ensure the crypto community gets the regulatory clarity it has repeatedly asked for? People, we all deserve answers now. We deserved them a long time ago. And Chairman Gensler has the answers to those and other questions. He just refuses to share them with us. Now, it's clear that some Americans invested in unsustainable schemes and even fraud, and we need to investigate that fraud and prosecute any violations of the law. These circumstances beg the question, where was the SEC? Had the SEC responded to calls for clarity on how it would apply existing security laws to novel digital assets and services, something that I and many others repeatedly asked for, things might have been different. For instance, the SEC could have said how it intended to apply the Howey and Reeves tests, which the SEC uses as a primary mechanism for determining when something is a security. The SEC almost certainly believed that too, because in February they went after BlockFi for offering a similar lending product. Here's the problem with the SEC refusing to publish regulatory clarity about when digital assets or services are securities. In the absence of that clarity, you're left with this ad hoc approach to consumer protection known as regulation by enforcement. Now, there are at least 4 problems with this capricious and unevenly applied strategy that the SEC is pursuing. One, it's a serious challenge for any well-meaning innovator striving to comply with existing laws and regulations if he doesn't know how they'll be applied. Number two, it stifles innovation. Market participants who lack the benefit of understanding the SEC's thinking prior to designing a product, they may never create something that could be very useful to consumers out of a fear of how the SEC will interpret it. Number three, creates a legal gray area that allows entities with a higher tolerance for legal risk to offer products that might be very bad for consumers. And number four, it's ineffective. Just ask those who lost money on these crypto lending projects. Let me give another example. When the SEC announced insider trading charges involving a former Coinbase employee last week, it claimed that the offenders had illegally traded 9 digital assets that were securities. Now, the SEC, finally, in their complaint, they lay out the reasons why they believe these digital assets are securities. I'm very skeptical of their arguments. Yet they've still failed to disclose the rationale publicly before launching the investigation. That kind of approach is patently unfair to investors and developers alike. So while I appreciate today's hearing topic, it's a missed opportunity without having the SEC here.
And welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is going to be a long video. I just wanted to say that I do agree with CTF Commissioner Carolyn Pham, as well as Senator Patrick Toomey, especially because the recent SEC complaint not only is stifling innovation, but is pretty inaccurate according to me. Now, since I am sending this video out to the people mentioned, as well as pretty much any person in government that I can think of that would deserve to see this, I am also going to try to send this to the defense of those mentioned in the SEC complaint, especially because the entire complaint hinges upon those being securities. Now, I believe the SEC is extremely incorrect. Again, like Senator Patrick Toomey, I am quite skeptical of the SEC argument. But before we get into anything further, let me just go ahead and describe who I am. I am just a retail investor. I like to talk into my computer, and I am an AMP token holder and user. And what do you mean by user? Well, I'll go ahead and start playing this video here. You can see this is just me at a drive-thru with Dunkin' Donuts, one of Flexa Network's partners, and you'll see exactly how easy and quick it is to make a payment. For example, I'm just pulling up the app here, the Spedin app by Flexa, and yep, generates a Flex code. They go ahead and scan it, and that's it. And that code, actually, I don't mind showing that code because it's temporary. And also, none of this is financial advice. I am not a lawyer. I am just a YouTuber. I call out projects and people that are both disingenuous and not accurate, as well as projects that I do not believe are very truthful or honest in their marketing, especially those that have trouble with compliance and, again, don't really disclose everything that needs to be disclosed. Meanwhile, I have found one amazing project in the cryptocurrency space that I believe to be Flexa Network and the AMP token. And before I get into the SEC complaint, which I will go through and describe what I agree with and what I do not agree with when it comes to AMP token and Flexa Network, I feel it is important that I at least go over what is AMP token and how that compared to Flexacoin, which the SEC sort of jumbles together in one big mess when they are completely different. Now, this is on docs.amptoken.org, which is an official website of AMP token. They describe AMP as a universal collateral token designed to facilitate fast and efficient transfers of any real-world application. When using AMP as collateral, transfers of value are guaranteed and can settle instantly. While the underlying asset reaches final settlement, a process that can take anywhere from seconds to days, AMP is held in escrow by a collateral manager. Once the transaction successfully settles, the AMP collateral is released and made available to collateralize another transfer. AMP exists to serve as a universal collateral for anyone and any project, so it is very open. It is open source. The function of AMP token is built into the token itself. And why this is important is because there is an inherent trade-off between speed and security that has made it challenging to use cryptocurrencies in the real world. By serving as collateral for asset transfers, AMP provides speed without compromising on security. Now, whenever both the CTFC commissioner and the senator were speaking, they talked about how the SEC complaint and regulation by enforcement can be a hindrance to builders and developers, as well as stifling just innovation in general. And this goes to why AMP token is important. Because, as we can see here, this new ability to use any asset immediately upon transfer is a feature any asset can benefit from, whether digital or physical, cryptocurrency or central bank digital currency. Now for my critics or just the uneducated or even those mentioned here, this is actually a real-world problem. And for a real-world example that AMP token has never talked about or mentioned, Flexa Network's never mentioned, I will go ahead and mention it here because I came across this. This is from PricewaterhouseCoopers. They are one of the big four in accounting firms. As you can see here on their Wikipedia page, they're the second largest professional services network in the world, and they have a revenue of $45.1 billion as of 2021 and 295,000 employees, with a provenance stretching back to 1854. So I think with close to 170 years of experience, they might know a thing or two about what they're talking about, especially when it comes to the financial markets. And they bring up a very real-world problem with the new FedNow real-time payment system. If we scroll down here, you can see here that there's actually going to be some liquidity needs. Because to summarize here, not only have excess reserve balances been steadily declining, but banks want it to decline even more, while at the same time the real-time payments network needs increased intraday liquidity, so that way they can settle those payments. And to quote directly, this produces an inherent challenge in which participants need to balance the risk of underfunding payment accounts and the inefficiency produced by overfunding accounts. So it seems like if that were to ever be an issue, that potentially AMP token could be used to solve that issue by providing the collateral and the liquidity while those payments settle in a decentralized network that cannot be attacked or taken down by state actors or bad third parties. And going from here, we'll actually show that there is a big difference between Flexacoin and AMP token, what the SEC can't seem to wrap their heads around, at least in the complaint. We'll go down here and see that what makes AMP token unique is that the collateral managers and token partitions are now built into the token itself. With Flexacoin, as you can see here, this was the announcement that Flexacoin was actually changing to AMP token. This goes over some of the more detailed aspects, but just for right now, just wanted to say we will come back to this article later in this video, but I just wanted to point out that Flex's collateralization implementation has been redesigned into a self-contained smart contract and will be open source to anyone to use without restriction. So they took Flexacoin, turned it into AMP token. Again, this was back in July 31st of 2020, almost 2 years ago. Again, there was an update on September 7th of 2020 that Flexacoin was migrating to AMP, and later in September 2020, they did not use Flexacoin anymore for the network. That was actually just now AMP token. There was no time limit, so even if you still hold Flexacoin, you could actually still change it over to AMP token today. Another feature of AMP token that makes it distinctly different from Flexacoin is there's actually a governance proposal program that I have even participated in. Again, this is a way that the community can actually submit things, such as future grant recipients, partnerships, cross-chain integrations, DeFi collaborations, and more. The one that I participated in that was passed was the proposal for Flexit at a subsidy of 1 billion AMP tokens to network rewards. That was for new collateral pools over the next 12 months, dependent on the size of the app. Alright, now let's get into probably the longest part of this video. I will be going over this. Again, I am not a lawyer. I have studied philosophy. I had 4 years of it in undergrad. That was my major. I did not graduate, but philosophy is pre-law, so I at least have some understanding of law. Might be rudimentary, but again, it's at least some understanding. These are just my personal opinions. We see here from at least June 2021, and it brings up this idea that they went ahead and front-ran these listing announcements, which again, if that's true, that is already illegal. There's no need to declare it a security in order for this to be illegal, but for the SEC's case, it would have to be declared as security, as that is what they have regulatory authority over. So I went back and looked at tweets from both Coinbase and Coinbase Pro. Again, Coinbase Pro, I had to go through the Wayback Machine. And as you can see here, they made the announcement that they were doing inbound transfers. So once liquidity was met, they were going to start trading. That was going to start on Thursday, June 10th of 2021. This tweet came out on the 8th of June 2021. And here is actually on Twitter. This is Coinbase back in June 10th of 2021. They went ahead and announced the launching of GTC, MLM, and AMP token. And as you can see here, that was listed in the complaint. Again, June 6th, June 7th, and June 8th. As the complaint alleges, it was about 48 hours, if not more, that this front running happened. Another issue I have with this complaint is that they go ahead and say that some issuers wrote white papers describing this project and promoting this offering, often in highly technical or pseudo-technical terms and jargon. I can understand why the SEC might have an issue with this white paper only because it is very complex, but if you actually take the time to sit down and understand what they're speaking of, again, you can actually find video explainers, things that actually go ahead and break this down for people, because it is very technical. Just because something is technical doesn't mean that it is bad. I do not understand why they're saying that this is pseudo-technical jargon, because, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of information here. You see these hexadecimal addresses, just stuff that is completely confusing to the average person. But if you understand what it is saying, it does make sense. I have this printed out. It's a good read. I read it every now and then. Again, I consider it a good read. A lot of people don't, especially once you start getting into this math, the high-level math. Again, they make sense. They actually cite the Cobb-Douglas productive functions. There are citations. Everything you need to know is available out there. You just have to do a lot of learning, because once you start getting into this math, it gets very technical. But whenever you figure it out and can actually break it down, it makes sense. It really does. So I don't understand this whole issue with white papers. Again, it's sort of downplaying the whole role of it. Right here, there's all your references. I mean, they made sure to cite actual real-world evidence, real-world applications, theories. Again, it makes sense. So, yeah, I have an issue with that in the complaint. So, page 23 of this complaint. Here is why they believe AMP token to be a security. Again, I'm going to go through these each individually. They go ahead and say that Flexa Network, aka Flexa, is a company incorporated in Delaware with its headquarters in New York, New York. They operate what it describes as a digital merchant payment network designed to enable rapid, universal, and secure processing of digital asset transfers. The Flexa Network. Yes, that is what they do. I have spent it at major retailers in the U.S., including the following: Lowe's, Barnes & Noble, Office Depot, Dunkin' Donuts, GameStop, Chipotle. The only two that I've gone to that I haven't been able to spend it at have been both Petco and Bed Bath & Beyond, and that is only because the register systems were so outdated. Again, the Petco that I went to, they had just now gotten Apple Pay functionality. Bed Bath & Beyond, they haven't updated their registers with their POS system in at least 5 years, at least the location I was at. And now we can go ahead and add on to what the SEC is saying here, because they are leaving out what I feel is important information. For example, this is on the Flexa Help Center, written by Trevor, one of the co-founders of Flexa, because people ask, why does Flexa need my personal information, which includes your name, date of birth, email address, and state or territory of residence? Again, you need a Flexa ID in order to use Flexa Network, and that is because Flexa is considered a money services business. There are certain steps that we must take in order to ensure that our network is not used for money laundering or terrorist financing. As part of that process, we are legally required to compare your full name, date of birth, and state or territory of residence against lists provided by the Office of Foreign Assets Control, aka OFAC, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and other government entities. Flexa takes compliance very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that they are a registered money services business with the United States Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, aka FinCEN. There's a registration number. Flexa also maintains NMLS ID with the nationwide multi-state licensing system and registry. And it's licensed in the following jurisdictions. Again, this appears to be updated because Alaska was just added 22 days ago. Again, you can go ahead and see this is the list. There are special disclosures for Hawaii. There's still a project going on that ends on December 31st of 2024, so they can still operate in Hawaii through that one. Maryland, you can see here there's just a little disclaimer for Maryland where they can send complaints to. And Tennessee discloses that it's a money transmitter and that the license and the required surety bond do not cover the transmission of virtual currency, because Tennessee Department of Financial Institutions does not regulate virtual currency. They make it quite easy to find this. You don't even have to type in the NMLS ID. It's a link directly to it. Check the box, type in what you see here. And right here, again, all these licenses, like I said about Alaska, right there it is, July 8th of 2022. So they make their compliance very easy to find. And even back when it was Flexacoin, you can see here the notice of exempt offering of securities. This was actually written and submitted, the SEC Form D, which is nowhere listed in the complaint anywhere when discussing Flexacoin or AMP token. You can go ahead and see that they do provide everything they needed to provide. This tells you how many investors actually were able to buy Flexacoin at the time. There was 5, and the total amount sold was right around 733,000. This was before the Flexa Network was operational. There was also an amendment that was published 15 days later. This was the second funding round. And we scroll down again. You can see here that there were 54 total, and the total amount was $14.1 million. And back in April 25th, 2019, Flexa went ahead and talked about this because of their private token sale 2 weeks ago. So they went ahead and made this a private sale. It was not offered to the general public. This was again before the Flexa network was fully operational. And if you scroll down, even in the earliest days, they start talking about the Flexa token distribution. This was through Masari, which is a very good resource for anyone that needs to find out these things, like the token allocation. For example, we got 10% network development fund, 25% merchant development fund, 25% developer grants, 20% to the founding team and employee pool, and 20% in token sales. Compare this to XRP, which was 70, I believe it was 77.8%, It was a very high percentage that was allocated just to Ripple. Keep on scrolling down here, we see the liquid supply curve. This goes all the way through 2045, and a large chunk of that is the 2.5 million per day that are released into the collateral pools with the staking contract. This is the app. There's currently 233 million in spending capacity on the Flexa network, and that equates to 25.4 billion AMP tokens. You can easily find information on these apps as well as the transformers, including the Lightning Network transformer, which again processes Bitcoin payments, which is just one of the many integrations that AMP token has. Which Lightning Network brings me back to the licensing and compliance side of Flexa, because if you go down here, there's the licenses for El Salvador, and they are a registered Bitcoin service provider with the Central Bank of El Salvador. And I had covered this previously, again, back in my Jack Mahler's video, describing how Flexa Network was registered in El Salvador to do payment processing with all types of shops and public in general. This was taken directly from the website in El Salvador and was translated into English via Google Translate. So, number 96 here. According to Flexa, the Flexa network allows consumers to use and merchants to accept crypto assets to make everyday purchases. Again, I did that today. I've done that many times, even multiple times this week. Customers seeking to use crypto assets link their wallets to Flexa. Again, you need that Flexa ID for compliance reasons. When the customer makes a purchase, Flexa states that it will pay the merchant immediately in either fiat or convertible digital currency of its choice, and deducts the equivalent value of crypto assets from the customer's wallet. Flexa then collects payment processing fees from the merchant. Yes, this is laid out in the white paper. Number 97. Flexa states that the AMP token serves as collateral to decentralize risk within the Flexa network. According to Flexa, this process works as follows. Number 1, AMP holders stake their AMP tokens in blockchain-based collateral pools, which serve to guarantee transactions taking place on the Flexa network. Yes, I showed the dApp where you can actually do this staking. Number 2, when a transaction takes place on the Flexa network, AMP tokens equal to the fiat value of the transaction are held in escrow by a collateral manager, while Flexa settles the transaction by converting the crypto assets into fiat currency. Yes, this is part of what AMP token does, not just on the Flexa network, but the Flexa network uses AMP token. AMP token is not exclusive to Flexa network. Number 3. Once the transaction settles, the AMP tokens are released and can be used to collateralize another transaction. Again, correct. And 4, if the transaction fails, the AMP tokens held as collateral are liquidated. Yes, that is the risk. decentralized the risk. To reward those that stake AMP, Flexa uses the fees it collects from merchants to make open market purchases of AMP and then distributes those AMP tokens based on a pro rata shares of the tokens that were staked in the collateral pool, which can lead to further profit. Well, that is a very simple explanation that does not take into account market dynamics. For example, those open market purchases of AMP would require mass adoption. I covered this in a video of mine, just laying out a basic math example. Again, I didn't even calculate what the potential price could be, just the idea that there would be a liquidity crisis, aka that if 30 million persons, roughly 9% of the current US population, were to spend $50 a day, and that would to assume that the fees Flex would be passing to the stakers would equate to 0.5%, or sub 1%, which is often advertised by Flexa Network as their merchant fee is sub 1%. And a lot of the framework for this example was actually drawn from the white paper. No high-level math, just some simple explanations. Again, this was back whenever AMP token was around 3 times the price of what it is now. Number 98. AMP is the successor token to Flexacoin, which was first developed by Flexa in February of 2018. Between February 2018 and April 2019, Flexa sold 12 billion Flexacoins in private sales to groups of accredited investors, token funds, and other strategic partners, with over 14 million raised in April 2019 alone. Yes, that was what the SEC Form D was. So the SEC was made aware of this if they even bothered to look at Form D, which they have no legal requirement to do so. At the time, Flexa Network was not yet operational. Flexa has claimed that the proceeds from this token sale have helped us continue to build out the Flexa Network through additional merchant integrations and relationships with critical infrastructure partners. Alright, number 99 just describes the token supply model as Masari covered in that Flexacoin Medium post. Number 100. To help collateralize the Flexa Network, in November 2019, Flexa announced a plan to distribute a total of 1 billion Flexacoin, 2.5 million each day starting in December 16th of 2019, from its network development fund in the form of rewards to everyone who provides capacity on the Flexa network. In January 2020, Flexa began public sales to investors of an additional 4.5 billion Flexacoins. Yes, this was covered by Masari, and this is part of the plan to have the full token distribution laid out by 2045, aka fully diluted market supply. There would be no additional coins released. That would be the time which all the coins had been released into the public. Those 2.5 million a day, as well as the different capacities and actual usage, are how these APYs are calculated on the Flexa network. As you can see here, this is just a simple little trick to see the APYs. You can go ahead and see that there are multiple APYs. I think the highest is around 10%. These are just pools that don't have a lot of people staking to them. While you can see here that Lightning Network does have a lot of people staking to it, it is being used in El Salvador. You can see here that, everything is fluctuating between close to 10% and around 5.75%, almost 6%. That is Spedin. That's the one that I use the most. And Spedin is currently the only app that is available to those in the US. More wallets are coming. The reason why I say it's the only one available right now is that recently Gemini terminated the Gemini Pay program. Previously I did use Gemini Pay a lot, and then I transitioned to Spedin. But once these are more opened up, more wallets are integrated, I plan on using a different wallet. And probably still using Spedin occasionally. Now 101 here is one that I have a lot of problems with. To quote, in September 2020, Flexa announced it was migrating the collateral functions of Flexa Network from Flexacoins to the newly developed AMP token, and the Flexacoin holders could exchange their tokens for AMP at a 1-to-1 ratio. Flexa's management explained that because of the nature of the interfaces required to implement the new capabilities of AMP, it wouldn't have been possible to simply upgrade Flexacoin token. Flexacoin retained the limit of 100 billion tokens. Like I said, we would be coming back to this Flexacoin article, because this is the article that the SEC actually quoted. It's down here, right here, this paragraph right here. But this idea of AMP token being a security, well, I took a screenshot and actually edited this to make this a little bit more easy to understand. Now, this is what I believe. It is just my opinion. I believe that what is actually underlined in green directly contradicts the SEC claim of AMP being a security, because that would require a common enterprise, such as it being exclusive to Flexa Network. Since it is open source and widely available to anyone to use, that sort of throws an issue into that Howey test. because AMP token is actually greater than just Flexa Network. Now to quote, Flexa's collateralization implementation has been redesigned into a self-contained smart contract and will be open sourced for anyone to use without restriction. Finally, this new token depreciates the ability for Flexa or any other entity to make administrative changes to the token contract, an important step to decentralizing control over the token interface. So now it is not solely controlled by Flexa. And then to add on a part that I didn't underline, in fact, any upgrade capabilities have been strictly limited to appending and not removing additional collateral manager implementations, the process for which will be shared in the coming weeks. So there is a process where people can go ahead and add additional features if they so choose to do so. Actual innovation. At the bottom here, furthermore, in order to make this new token more broadly accessible to collateralization applications beyond Flexa, the Flexacoin brand will be retired and replaced with something far more universal and descriptive of its purpose, AMP. So Flexa went ahead and is actually removing the branding that would make it tied to Flexa itself. This would be so that way it'd be more open to everyone to use. It wouldn't be confused with, oh, if I buy this token, clearly I have a stake in Flexa Network. And that's something that people sort of fail to understand, is that yes, Flexa Network is the main user of AMP token, but potential other integrations, like the FedNow issue that I showed, could actually completely dwarf Flexa Network. That is to assume that the innovation won't be stifled by this regulation through enforcement that the SEC is trying to do. 102. On September 30th, 2020, Flexa stopped using Flexacoins as collateral for transactions on the Flexa Network. Yes, that is a fact. Now here's where the SEC continues to muddy the waters with 103. Purchasers of Flexacoin/AMP tokens invested in a common enterprise. In its November 2020 AMP white paper, Flexa explained that participants stake AMP into pools that secure the network. These collateral pools, comprised entirely of AMP, are what allow Flexa to operate. Or, as Flexa put in the AMP white paper, the AMP token serves as a singular type of collateral within Flexa to decentralize risk within the network. If the collateral pools are profitable, then investors who stake AMP can share in the profits. So again, I've shown that there is a big difference between Flexacoin and AMP, especially when it comes to even how the network operated. They moved all that functionality into the AMP token. Again, this is even in the SEC complaint, but they didn't really get into the details. That AMP is widely available to be used in other parts of cryptocurrency, including DeFi, payments, lending. This is easily found here on amptoken.org when it comes to the relationship between AMP and Flexa, that AMP is the open source collateral token available to anyone to use in any application. Describes that Flexa is the company that created AMP in collaboration with Consensus, which is something that the SEC also leaves out of this complaint, including developed and released the first AMP collateral manager contract as open source, and that by using AMP as collateral, Flexa can secure payment authorizations while the underlying asset remains unconfirmed and approve the merchant transactions in near real time. It's just one use case of the AMP token. And if we go here to the DeFi apps and markets section, under the ecosystem/markets part of amptoken.org, you can go ahead and see right there is Lightning Network. There's a few other dexes, payments, Chainlink uses it. You can see here that there are other integrations happening. They're just not on the same level as Flexa Network currently. Hopefully there'll be more added, assuming that this SEC case does not stifle innovation. So I feel it's very disingenuous to say that Flexa Network is the only thing that is driving the price of AMP, which, as we can see here through Dune Analytics, this was compiled by Bubby.io, a member of the Flexa team. I think this was actually compiled before they became a member of the Flexa team. Not really sure. I'd have to actually do more research to verify. But this is all just on-chain metric data. You can see here that the highest all-time price of AMP token was not, in fact, driven by Flexa Network. This was actually driven by the Coinbase pump when it was launched on Coinbase. Again, you can see this is just the spending capacity. This is not the actual price of the token. But since the two are correlated, the higher the price of the token, the greater the spending capacity on the network would be. The Coinbase pump is a term that is commonly used in social media platforms when discussing cryptocurrency, as it is a well-known fact that Coinbase, the largest exchange in the US, whenever it lists a token, there is usually a drastic increase in the token price. We've seen this with various different cryptos. AMP was just one of the multiples that have happened, when it comes to just an exponential growth for a short time and then followed by an immediate sell-off. And this was also during the Great Bull Run. I remember this day. I had actually been involved in AMP token before the Coinbase launch when it was on Gemini. And it still is on Gemini. They just do not have the Gemini Pay app anymore. Once again, the SEC is muddying the waters here on 104. Prior to the Flexacoin offering, Flexa described Flexacoin in the same way, stating in the May 2019 white paper that Flexacoin is staked to collateralize every payment on the Flexa network. Again, yes, it was mentioned the same way, but there is definitely some serious technological differences between Flexacoin and AMP. Even the branding is different. Flexacoin was not open source in the same way. It was only used on the Flexa Network. 105. AMP investors also share a common interest with Flexa's management team. Flexa explained in an April 2019 Medium post that 20% of the total percentage of Flexacoin was reserved for the founding team and employee pool to incentivize current and future Flexa team members. All supply from this allocation will be distributed on a 4-year vesting schedule. Yes, that is because it has the same exact tokenomics as Flexacoin. Those did not change. What I believe to be the most accurate way to describe this argument is actually the inverse. Flexa's management team shares a common interest with AMP investors, as AMP, again, is open source and widely available to use by anyone. When AMP token does good, so does Flexa Network. Whenever AMP token sees increased utility and usage through any other platform, again, open source, that means that the Flexa management team would also see a benefit. 106. Investors in Flexacoin/AMP had a reasonable expectation of profits based on the efforts of others. From the start, Flexa has regularly emphasized the profit opportunity for AMP holders. Well, with that first line, I have an issue with it, because I don't expect reasonable expectation of profits based on the efforts of others. For example, as someone who stakes AMP, I receive rewards, even through my own spending. Now granted, my spending is very small and would not make a large difference in the entire supply of AMP token, but again, this is very early. I cannot completely get away from the banking system. I still have to use banks. Everyone does. I can't just simply pay my bills with Flexa Network, or I would. And now the second line, the from the start. I have another issue with this because if you actually go to the social media or ways to connect with the team, such as Discord or Telegram, price chat is specifically banned. You can see here, this is actually in the AMP community Telegram, where members of the Flexa team actually try to engage with the AMP community. And you can see here that anytime someone even starts talking about the most basic of prices, increase of transaction volume in this example, you can see right there met with just sort of a generic reply to, hey, if you want to talk about price, here's an unofficial price chat that no one in the Flexa team really cares about or goes to. And this screenshot is just straight up from the rules of the Flexa Network Discord channel. Again, right there in the middle, price chat is not allowed here and may result in bans. There is no reason to talk about price chat. It is actually for the development, the future integrations, and the increased utility and usage of AMP token. And in the same 106, they just go ahead and describe things in the white paper. 104 is a quote, which I don't know what they're trying to say here when it comes to this complaint, declaring AMP a security, because let's just get into the quote. Stakers don't collateralize Flexa payments purely out of the goodness of their hearts. Rather, as incentive for deploying Flexacoin as collateral, and to compensate the risk they incur when collateralizing unproven apps on the network, stakers earn a network reward generated after every successful payment confirmation. Yes, this is risk versus reward. You don't take a risk without having some sort of potential reward in the future. Again, that's just common sense. 108. Flexa has continually promoted the availability of AMP and previously Flexacoin to be bought and sold on secondary trading platforms. For example, on July 9th, 2019, Flexa posted on its blog that Flexacoin was now available to buy and sell on secondary market platform, making it easier than ever for people all over the world to take part in Flexa's vision of mainstream cryptocurrency payments, and soon to stake those payments themselves while earning rewards for collateralizing every purchase. Again, they are continually trying to confuse both Flexacoin and AMP as the same exact thing when the digital assets are quite different. And this is the Medium post that the SEC complaint is referencing. As of today, Flexacoin, aka FXC, is now available to buy and sell on Bittrex International for non-US residents. So they were not promoting this for US residents, they were just letting people know that, hey, you could buy it here. And now there's more interesting things in this that, again, they left out of the complaint, which sort of makes sense because, well, you don't want to submit evidence to ruin your own case.
Your Honor, I move that I be disbarred for introducing this evidence against my own clients.
Because at this time, when this post was written, they had already launched the network. It was already in use, using 5 different cryptocurrencies and accepted at 39,000 locations. There's even tweets here of people that were using it. One person used it at Caribou Coffee, another person used it at Dunkin' Donuts, another person used it at Baskin Robbins, and another one here using it at the Coffee Bean and Tea. So I could understand there'd be more of an issue if Flexa Network wasn't operational, but at this time it was. They sort of left that out. Between January 2021 and June of 2022, most recently, they made 6 announcements about it being listed on additional secondary trading markets and crypto trading platforms. I don't know about you, but quite a few cryptocurrency projects actually do this. If the argument is to be made that AMP is a security, that pretty much makes all of cryptocurrency a security. Now, 109 I find quite hilarious. The May 2019 Flexacoin white paper devoted an entire section to our team, making it clear that the co-founders and a small number of employees were responsible for Flexa's administrative, marketing, and technical development. Further, as noted above, Flexa's founders and management team held 20 billion of the total 100 billion Flexacoin, and therefore hold the same number of AMP tokens to incentivize current and future Flexa team members. You mean I shouldn't be involved in a project where the team is well known to the public, as well as one where the team is actually vested in the actual project itself? Because otherwise that seems like more of a scam if they're just not that invested and I can't find out who the team is. 110. Flexa and its founders have continued to emphasize their importance to the future and success of the Flexa network and AMP. For example, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but we can see here that there is definitely some muddying of the waters, because here they mention an AMP, they're not mentioning Flexacoin, yet they're bringing up this video. June 18th, 2020, the CEO and co-founder of Flexa stated in a YouTube video, "We, the founders, built this network from the ground up, and we've created an open network." So they're saying AMP token in June 18th of 2020. So this is the video they are directly quoting. You can see here that this is the Flexa project update. This was back when it was still Flexacoin. Because as you can see here that, again, this post about Flexacoin evolving and turning into AMP wasn't until July 31st of 2020. Yet the SEC is referencing a video from a month previous where they didn't even mention the name AMP. But here was what was mentioned.
So the token, we've got some token upgrades, some new functionality that essentially allows it to be more easily usable, stakeable across a lot of our other partners that we're currently working with. So we actually built this with a partner currently in audit, a technical white paper around this, but again, just more enhancements to the token itself.
And again, right there, they went ahead and said that it was being co-developed with another partner and it was being audited. If you go over here to docs.amptoken.org/about/security audits, right here, consensus diligence. They teamed up with Consensus to put it together. You click on it. Right here's a security audit, which I'm sure the SEC would have some trouble understanding and just call this a bunch of technical jargon as they called the white paper. But you can see here there's quite a bit of information. You can see here there's a lot of things that were fixed, some that were acknowledged, but all the major issues were fixed. This is just development. I don't understand what the SEC's problem is with this or why they're trying to confuse both Flexacoin and AMP token, even though there's great technological differences, let alone branding differences and the ability to be used by anyone versus Flexacoin being sort of exclusive to Flexa Network's usage through their own collateral managers. And the SEC also has issues with Flexa Network and I guess just AMP token in general, letting people know that there have been upgrades and new partnerships where Flexa is being adopted. I don't understand the issue because, well, when it comes to technology, I think that the people who are using it should be made aware of where it is being used at, as well as any potential upgrades, any changes, just sort of increased utility and usage. For example, a lot of people in the community, myself included, are hoping for more restaurants because it's getting a little bit tiring eating just Dunkin' Donuts and Chipotle all the time. hopefully there'll be more coming out. They have been making great progress. Stay tuned to my channel if you want to see, because I plan on covering that. But just to finish out this video, this part here just shows me exactly how little the SEC cared about this case, or at least putting it together, because I don't even think they proofread the damn thing. Just go ahead and I'm going to bring up my calculator here, because you see this, that the price has fluctuated from 0.009 at first issuance to as high as 0.01, approximately a 1,000% return. I don't know about you, but if I take my calculator and if I just, put in 0.009 and times it by 1.225, aka 22.5%, yeah, that's the return I get. So, yeah, they didn't even bother to proofread it. They sort of left that extra zero in. Makes me feel real confident in the SEC's ability to prevent fraud and everything when they can't even get basic math right.
You've heard of, Bitcoin, Ether, and a lot of others. And this is the analogy I like to use for those. Platypus has duck-like features, but it's not a duck. It has mammal-like features. It's not a mammal. But like cryptocurrencies or tokens have currency-like features, but they're really not currencies for the most part. And then they even have security-like features, but they're not securities either. It's sort of this little bit new model of what is used within these decentralized networks.
For our example, again, what we originally sold through a 506B offering to accredited investors has migrated into a new product. So that token, which was called Flexacoin at the time, is now called AMP. Now, I would say, and our lawyers would agree, and even the NYDFS has agreed, that AMP is not a security. So that's super interesting from the perspective of our country, or our company, in only just over a 2-year span. Something that we agreed was a security and we sold as an exempt security is now known to be a non-security. Well, how did we accomplish that? The way we accomplished that is because we built our network, we built our company, we actually completed it. And the token that we developed is actually used for the purpose of running that network. It serves as collateral to power the network. So if there are people out there that buy our token, if they buy AMP and it's for sale on the Gemini exchange and others, they buy that AMP to stake our network, which is they power our network with that collateral on our network. The AMP is the collateral that guarantees the merchant's payment. It's the collateral that makes sure our network operates. So whether it's law firms or in-house counsel at Gemini or in-house counsel or anywhere, they can look at that and see the difference between what it once was and what a lot of tokens were, which were purely something that was built to sell but not to use at that time. Going forward, I'm not sure what that means, except to say again, I highly recommend that anybody considering the sale of a token to fundraise for a company strictly follows the guidance that the SEC has given. And to date, that means you cannot sell it as a utility if you haven't built that network on which it runs.
You've gone after XRP because XRP is a security. But you haven't gone after all the major crypto exchanges that process tens of thousands, if not far more, transactions. If XRP is a security, and you think it is, and I think it is, why are these crypto exchanges not in violation of law? And is it enough that the crypto exchanges have said, well, having committed tens of thousands of violations in the past, we promise not to do any more in the future? Is that enough to get you off the hook for enforcement?
So again, I can't talk about what matters we're looking at or not looking at. We have brought exchange cases. We brought one last year against Poloniex. I share your concerns that if the securities are...
It's easier to go after the small fish than the big fish. But the big fish operating the major exchanges did many, many tens of thousands of transactions with XRP. You know it's a security. That means they were illegally operating a securities exchange. They know it's illegal because they stopped doing it, even though it was profitable. So if they know it's illegal, and you know it's illegal, and I know it's illegal, I hope you'd focus on that. And then finally, we have Tether, which is broke a money market mutual fund in every way. It broke the buck. Can you, I realize you're reluctant to talk about individual matters, but can you tell us why you went after Terra but not Tether?
Again, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on who we're going after or not going after, but I understand your concerns, and we've added resources to our crypto assets unit to look at issues that put investors at risk, including the issues you've raised in your questions.
Add fortitude and courage as well. You're going to have to take on some cases that you're not certain of winning.